Hey, friends and neighbors, all you citizens of the world, welcome to the 34th edition of Heartland at Home. It's for the week of January 9th, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. There's a lot of heavy things going on, and we are going to look forward to later in the show having our guest, Mark Kastel of Organic Eye, give us an overview on what's going on in the organic movement. But first, let's hear a few good things from the co-host. Thom, we'll start with you.
Well, in lockdown quarantine, self-imposed, our family's caught up with a lot of movies. Did like 9 of the 12 Christmas movies we had put in the stack. But I think the most moving thing we saw was Ma Rainey. It's a very compelling August Wilson play. It is a play, but it's very dramatically cast and lots of music. It's very moving. And if on a lighter front, the Modern Miss Fisher mysteries, if you can afford it on Acorn, quite a nice diversion, Australian detective series. It was a great way to kind of take a break from the pandemic and certainly the other news of the week. Katy?
I had an unexpected delivery of fruit, cinnamon bread, and fresh laid eggs from you, Thom, and your wife, Jean. And as a single older person, I really appreciate that because I cannot always go into my very narrow-aisled favorite local grocery store. So thank you for taking care of me.
And I also enjoyed Ma Rainey's Black Bottom this week, but I have to say what really was the best part of the week was waking up on Wednesday morning and knowing that we had elected 2 Democratic senators from Georgia. And I know things got heavier a little bit later in the day, but that was very important, and it will remain to be important for years to come.
Yeah, talk about the most important news of the day that got swept away by other stuff. Aren't we proud of our Proud Boys? And why is everyone so surprised about what happened? That was mostly my reaction after an exhausting evening, seeing Congress finally stand up to their constitutional responsibility, led by the vice president. We do have a president-elect whose electoral college victory has been certified. And I think the only steps next as we go into the weekend and next week is sorting through why a bunch of white protesters could take over the Capitol and walk away free.
Yeah, I think there were like 50 some odd arrests yesterday. And if you go back to Black Lives Matters, there were over 400. And just compare the 2 crowds and what they did.
Well, for starters, Trump's crowd was maybe 30,000 at the most, 20,000. When we protest, we get 100,000 or more. I mean, remember how he lied about his inaugural crowd? Yesterday's crowd, the Epiphany crowd, I'm going to call it, was, close to his inaugural crowd, maybe a little less. He absolutely incited them to come down the street and break into the congressional, to the Congress building. What I want to know today, I've already written both my senators and my congresswoman. I want this president fired. 2 more weeks of him is 2 weeks too many. We are in danger with him there. That is pure and simple, the most important message out of yesterday. And I hope every single body who listens to this show has told your senators and your congresspeople, we can't handle this guy. No.
The alternative is that we declare the 25th Amendment null and void because it clearly doesn't seem to be an effective way to remove someone who's clearly certifiably a danger to our democracy.
Well, let's not make it null and void until we try using it, shall we, Thom?
Well, why hasn't it been used? It should be on the first docket on the Congress's agenda right now is to file impeachment charges and to get Pence to sign the paperwork to evoke the 25th Amendment.
I also want to just really get serious about Trump lighting the fires of fascism. I think it's really important that people face that the Republican Party enabled this guy over and over. They changed their principles, they changed their stories, They accepted him and they used him. And we cannot let people forget that.
It's true. And you know what I heard Rudy Giuliani said to that crowd right after Trump incited them? Did you hear what Rudy said? Rudy said, now let's have trial by combat. That's effing Rudy Giuliani Flippinani. Trial by combat. You know, a real big fighter that guy is.
I always knew he was more comfortable over in Ukraine and the former Soviet Union than he was here, because that's his mentality. I mean, I'm really not surprised, folks. We've been warning for 7 years that Trump is a symptom. He barely could organize a coup correctly. And yet he is a danger to the republic because of the dissent he has stirred up. As our president-elect said yesterday, it's the job of the executive to inspire, not to incite. All this guy has done since he came down his gold-plated escalator is incite and divide. Why are we surprised that there would be an attempt to take over the Capitol by white nationalist fascists? Are we surprised?
No.
He ordered them to a month ago. Words mean something, as do elections. So I think moving forward, what we do next, not only taking care of these criminals, but what we do next to turn things around is really critical.
You know, this is the head explode section of our show. And I got to say that I had already had something that made my head explode, but it doesn't compare to what happened at the White House on Wednesday. But it is the fact that we have a big state called Nebraska. They raise a lot of cattle. They have a lot of, meat processing plants. And the governor, one Pete Ricketts, who is the brother of the owner of the Cubs, has said that undocumented workers can't get the vaccine. Now, this is after the president forced him, Ricketts, to keep the packing house plants open because the meat was essential for the American diet, and that the undocumented workers were also first responders. Or essential workers is what they were, and they are. And some of those plants are 60% immigrants, most of them undocumented. And while I guess they've backed off a little bit about people getting the vaccine and saying, well, they won't get it first, it really just, where are their priorities at? Here they use these people, they make money off these people get the virus and are in danger of getting the virus, and then they get put at the end of the line. It's really an skewed situation.
Anyone who buys a ticket to Wrigley Field clearly has no problem in supporting anti-immigrant, racist, anti-women, anti-immunization jerks, quirks. I mean, these are
glad I'm a Sox fan.
Me too.
But you know what? The other problem, and the other, intense reason why we need to fire this guy, and I mean today, whenever you're listening to this, he's still got the nuclear code in his hands, okay?
For 2 more weeks.
And in the last week, we've had Iran making really scary moves via uranium enrichment up to the significant 20% point. The demonstrations, the attacks on embassies and envoys, 1 year after our assassination of their beloved general. I want Trump gone like yesterday, because if he gets a notion to react to this.
Well, imagine if he was paying attention to his job. These are pirates. Agents of the Iranian government took over a South Korean oil tanker this week and diverted it to an Iranian port. Didn't hear about this one, like many other things we're not hearing about, because there is this other problem of a fascist in the White House who should be gone tomorrow, if not later today.
Well, I mean, all of this.
Any day it wants to be, whatever, the sooner the better.
All of this, of course, happening while we are still completely missing the boat on on dealing with the coronavirus. We continue to stumble out of the gate with the vaccine implementation, and we're not the only ones. But we also know that the more privileged and the whiter people get the vaccine before, as you just said, Michael, the immigrant workers who are absolutely first line in everything from the meat packing to the grocery handling. I mean, it's stunning what we have been brought to. And you can talk about the occupant of the White House as being adult and a moron and it's everything else. But look at what he has caused. Look at what he has wrought in these 4 years, what he has brought us to as of 24 hours ago, the entire picture. I'm afraid he's a little smarter than we gave him credit for. It's not smart in a good way, but it's smart in a way that we better pay attention going forward.
Meanwhile, we're sending teachers and students back to schools before anyone's been vaccinated. And the teachers who did show up this past week report that the schools really aren't ready, safe, or secure to have crowds of kids in when there's still a pandemic going on. So I understand the urge to get those daycare centers going again, but ironically, it's white parents who are pushing for the reopening and showing up. Black and brown parents who are probably suffering the most of their kids don't want to send their kids into these Petri dishes. They know from their own experience, their families are the ones being hit the hardest by this pandemic. So I really hope the sane adults that are left will maybe step back a little bit and be a little calmer. Our grandson would love to be back in school, but for the moment, he'll be remote learning, and we're doing the best we can to make sure he doesn't entirely lose a school year.
Hey, Michael, I like your shirt. Show it to the people.
Take a stand. It's one of the shirts that we put out at the old days at the Heartland, Athletes United for Peace. It's the '68 Olympics when Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and the other fellow from New Zealand took a stand. And people are taking a stand all over the world these days. So we're all for that. That's why I wore it.
We're gonna break and listen to a song that brings in our guest, and we're hoping that it's a song he might like because it's Willie Nelson and the Boys performing "Hands on the Wheel" virtually at Farm Aid 2020 on the road back in just past September. Listen up, enjoy, and let's think about the near future of our dear country.
Stars. I tried all of the bars and I've nearly gone up in smoke. But now my hand's on the wheel of something that's real, and I feel like I'm going on. And in the shade of an oak down by the river sat an old man and a boy, setting sail, spinning tails and fishing for whales with a lady that they both enjoy. And it's the same.
And now we're really glad to bring on our guest, Mark Kastel. He's a longtime advocate for organic farming and small farmers. And he currently is living up in Rockton, Wisconsin, in the Driftless region over in the southwest corner. And he is involved these days with, as being the director of Beyond Pesticides project of the Organic Eye. And good morning to you, Mark. And how are you doing?
Thank you. Wonderful. We've had freezing fog here in Wisconsin for 3 days, so it's a winter wonderland.
Well, you've been involved in the organics racket for a while. Have you seen progress in getting the gospel of organics into practice? And what does that look like when it's being done correctly?
Well, I've been involved in the organic, what we call the organic farming movement for about 35 years. But about 20 years ago, and starting in the early 80s, it started commercializing, which we thought was great. And we want more people to eat healthy food. We want to steward the earth in a different manner. But we, at first, were attacked by corporate agribusiness until they figured out there was a upside profit potential here. And now they've attempted to co-opt this through what we call regulatory capture, like all other regulatory agencies in Washington, where the corporate lobbyists and the money and federal campaign starts to have an influence. So we've kind of morphed into two organic labels. So you've got local organics and a handful of really exemplary companies that are still independently owned. And then you have the rest, which are either kind of what I would call organic light. They're really organic by substitution. They're industrial agriculture, livestock factories, 30,000 acres of vegetable production in California or Mexico. Or there are some that might be fine, corporate owned, but it's all being done really in secret. So it really pays for people that are want to eat great food to be a little more discerning. Looking for that organic seal, the USDA organic seal, is just the first step in our research for good food.
Well, you mentioned Washington. So actually, the goings on in Washington recently is what prompted me to get a hold of you. President-elect Biden has picked Vilsack, the former governor of Iowa and also the former head of the agricultural department, to be the new head of his agriculture department. And I would imagine that has some people in the organic movement a little bent out of shape. Can you fill us in on that?
Well, the grassroots isn't too happy about it. Thom Vilsack is a lawyer who actually was a mayor of a small city where I think his wife grew up in Iowa when Biden ran for president decades ago, and they became friends. And of course, Iowa is the land of corn and beans and factory livestock farms. And he was bestowed the honor of the biotechnology governor of the year by the Monsantos of the world and other interests in genetically engineered food. So that was his credentials. He comes from a state that's very deep in conventional agriculture. And when he took over the USDA under the Obama administration, and ironically, I was on the transition team at the USDA thinking I believed Obama when he talked about hope and change. But when we came up with possible candidates for USDA secretary, believe me, Vilsack was not on any of our lists. And so he took over and he put in place at the USDA, the deputy administrator, Kathleen Merrigan, who ran the AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Service at the USDA. She ran that during the Carter administration. She was very cozy with the organic industry lobbyist at the Organic Trade Association, and ended up really, instead of trying to destroy organics, which was what was going on during the Bush administration and Republican control, they really did a great job co-opting it. So they watered down the regulatory oversight, the buffer between lobbyists and the rulemaking, and then they rolled out the red carpet for more industrial, shift to industrial farming, hydroponics, which is soilless, growing plants in a water and liquid fertilizer. Forget about soil, the ecosystem. We're really talking about, again, in industrial settings. So many of us are not all that pleased that Biden is bringing on Mr. Vilsack, and there is some organizing by a lot of progressive groups, not just in the agricultural arena, and we're passionately nonpartisan at Organic Eye, but there are a lot of folks that are concerned about his track record in racial justice, in food systems, and so it'll be really interesting now that we have a shift in control of Congress, whether the different factions in the Democratic Party will duke it out and whether he'll have a free ride in there.
Mark, can you tell us why conventional farming as practiced by agribusiness is not sustainable?
Well, it's not sustainable for a few reasons. One, it depends on copious amounts of agrochemicals to produce our food. And when we look at the use of petroleum, its impacts on the climate, we look at carbon sequestration in the soil. They're just environmentally, this is a disaster. And then we produce food for our citizenry that's just downright unhealthy. So it's interesting, the dynamic. We have the cheapest food in the world in the United States, bar none. Just the cheapest food. We have the most expensive healthcare by multiples. And it used to be reversed. We spend right now about 8% of our gross national product on food and 16 to 18% on healthcare and going up. And 30, 40 years ago, that was the reverse. And it would be one thing if we were getting a good return on our investment, but the levels of chronic disease in this country, our longevity compared to other industrialized developed countries is going down. The number of infant mortality, low birth weight children, chronic diseases like diabetes, obesity, autoimmune problems. I mean, this is not a healthy society. And the foundation of health is really our food. Hippocrates once said, let medicine be thy food and food be thy medicine. We've got some bad medicine going on right now.
Mark, you are called one of the most experienced independent fraud investigators in the organics industry. What you're doing now with Organic Eye, it's kind of detective work, isn't it? That you have to do in order to find out who's getting in the way of an organics food system. Go ahead.
Well, there's really two thrusts to the work that we're doing. One is the macro fraud that's going on. And the law says that all organic animals under organic management have access to the outdoors. And for ruminants, so sheep, goats, cows, they have to have access to pasture. But we have some egg production facilities with 1 million hens in one building on multiple tiers. We call those aviary systems. And they open some little doors that go out to a porch. Well, the law says outdoors. And so even, Kate, if you and I agreed that a structure with a concrete floor and a metal roof and maybe a screen wall was, quote, the outdoors, and you won't get me to agree with you on that. But even if we did agree on that,
right?
If only 3% of the birds in that structure could fit in that outdoor area, that means 97% of those birds are being illegally confined. The same thing with cattle. There's a factoid I might have given Michael once. There are new statistics out, but they're even worse. The last ones were 6 dairies are certified organic in Texas. 6 dairies produce 1.5 times more milk than 453 organic dairy farms in Wisconsin do. 6. These are giant livestock factories where they have some.
I was just going to say, I've seen those livestock pens as you drive from Las Cruces back to El Paso. It's
Yes.
Unbelievable. Holsteins, I think, well, black and white.
Right. And the bottom line is that when we've done some survey work, when I've done that in the past, the average legitimate organic dairy farmer, whose cows have names, not numbers in most cases, they have 1 acre per cow to graze on per season. That's how much grass you need. Some of those dairies down in Texas and New Mexico that are, quote, organic have 5 to 10 cows per acre. And if in technical terms, I refer to that as a joke. Or let's say it's certainly a stretch, but the joke gets even funnier, because some of those dairies in Texas cut hay off the same acreage that they're grazing on. So the acre I'm talking about in New York or Wisconsin or Minnesota, they graze on that all year. We don't know what percentage of that annual grass growth they bale for winter feeding down in Texas, but let's pretend it's 50%. That means they have effective stocking rates of between 10 and 20 cows per acre. That joke is, out of the stratosphere. So the USDA is allowing them to, get away with murder here.
Let's go from the macro to the micro for a moment. My wife considers herself a good urban gardener. She actually has a master naturalist certificate. And
Great.
we have what we characterize a permaculture berry forest going in the backyard with a lot of reclaimed alley material and construction material that we've built up over time. We've composted.
Where is this, Thom? In Rogers Park?
In Rogers Park.
I'm coming over next summer.
Right next to Ridge Avenue, north of Pratt. And we're lucky to have a double lot in the city. So we're very fortunate, but we're trying to use it, including composting for 40 years, built up garden beds and the like. And we have ducks. We used to have chickens.
Great.
So my question is, as we try to practice, albeit in a privileged piece of urban land, some permaculture, we're trying to have more organic food when we buy it, as well as raise our own. In the city, the growing season is such that without a greenhouse, we can't raise a lot of our own food, but we can certainly raise eggs and compost stuff so we're not putting it back in the waste stream. What could individuals, beyond the buying decision in the grocery market or a food co-op, what can individuals realistically do to turn around the way we grow and fix and buy and eat our food?
Well, the first thing is, choose organic and choose authentic organic. So, you need to be discerning in your choices. And if you go to organici.org, that's EYE, we're, as Kate was referring to, we're not privatized, we're publicized. And I have a new video series called Kastel's Kitchen. We talk about the best brands, where to invest your money. And so one, eat from your local food shed. So of all the fraud that I've investigated, almost none of it is local farmers delivering food to local people. So whether it's farms from southern Wisconsin or northern Illinois, descending on Chicago at the Green City Market, you're going to meet the farmer, ask them questions. They're going to invite you to a field day at their farm when it becomes normal. Then the other thing I would really encourage is eat seasonally. So, don't buy asparagus in January from Peru. I am picking out, be careful. So it may be organic, but it's not very sustainable, and it's, burning jet fuel to get here. But I am just picking out on winter squash right now. I never eat winter squash before the first hard freeze, so there's still local greens, but when I can't get local kale anymore in, let's say, November here in Wisconsin, I'm eating a lot of winter squash, parsnips, turnips, carrots, onions, beets, and I buy some greens, so I have a little fresh green. But here's a tip for your own little permaculture farm. Right here in Wisconsin, and it's not unusual that we'll have 35 degrees below zero in the winter. We, at our local food co-op, can buy a spinach grown in a unheated hoop house, plastic covering. So it's seeded at the right time of the year. I'm not an expert, I'm not growing it right now. So it's seeded, it establishes itself. They don't pick it when it's frozen. They wait till it warms up in there during the sunlight or in the day. There's some very cold weather that they don't pick it at all. And you can have fresh greens all year round. Certainly with a hoop house or cold frame, get some old window panes out of one of those renovated buildings on the north side, slope it towards the south, seed your spinach in there, and then by the spring it'll come up. You'll have fresh greens in February, March, and so you can do it too.
We just had kale from our backyard in our omelet yesterday morning. It's
Wonderful.
The last of the season, And we
Yeah.
put some down in the basement that'll last another week or so, but greens are remarkable, particularly with a cold frame.
A warm year. When I've done my own home gardening versus when I was a farmer, I had fresh local kale until December. And I wouldn't pick it when it was frozen. One of the greatest things you can do in your yard is if you grow carrots and you really nourish the soil, they're going to be so much more flavorful than these California carrots. They're like candy. Don't dig them. Leave them in the ground all year. So mulch on top of them with hay or some other material, or you can even put like a plywood on top of them, put something on top of them, let them stay in the ground and then dig them as you need them. They'll be moist. It's the perfect place for them. They won't dehydrate, but they'll get sweeter as they get more frost on them.
And I'll just say that thanks to the Glenwood Farmers Market, a lot of us have access in Rogers Park to local farmers, and many are delivering year round because they have greenhouses and other things, or they have suppliers and they're delivering organic food if you can afford it. And we will soon have a food co-op here that will also allow us to do that.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'll tell you, you can't afford, so two things. You can't afford not to buy organic food. It's a pay now, pay later basis. You can buy really great food now or put your energy in like you are, or you can deal with the healthcare industrial complex later. And so the other thing, that's Kovu. He helps as much as he can. The other thing that I really encourage your listeners to check out is CSAs, community supported agricultural farms or subscription farming. That you can get a box of fresh food delivered right into your neighborhood. Maybe a neighbor's garage is the pickup point. That was, maybe it was harvested 10 hours ago instead of 10 days ago in Mexico or flown in somewhere. And so that really gets you to eat in the season. I have a friend who operates a CSA, and when I'm not gardening here, I'm a member of Harmony Valley Farms, and they distribute into the Twin Cities and into Madison, Wisconsin. They don't make it to Chicago, but his season is from, I'm not sure if it's April, but certainly May through the end of December. And that's where I've got all these root crops still in my refrigerator that will last a long, long time. So eating within season, eating within our food shed, and then let's talk about the economic impact and economic justice. We talk about the multiplier effect. That every time you spend money at a local farm, you go to Walmart where you can buy organic food, or Target or Costco, and that money instantly goes to Arkansas, and a little bit of it goes to China or Mexico or these industrial farms in California, but very little of it besides the slave wages stay in your community. But if you sign up for a CSA or you go to the farmers market in Rogers Park, those farmers are getting 100% on the dollar, and they're spending it on their labor. They're spending it on boots for their kids. They're spending it on a new roof for the barn or plastic on the greenhouse. They're spending it with other local businesses. And those dollars tend to bounce around at least 6 or 8 times before they then leave and go somewhere else. So we can be very self-supportive, not of all of our food. I have some bananas in my pantry, but on a lot of our food. And I'm really lucky, and you can do this too. I get all of my meat from a friend who's a local farmer. They produce my chickens, my eggs. I get unpasteurized milk. I'm really plugged into the local farm community. And I guarantee you, so besides for organici.org, which I encourage, obviously, your readers to check out our mission, a couple other websites, Eat Wild and Local Harvest. They have, and the Weston A. Price Foundation. They have listings of farmers that you can access online or that deliver into your community. So how to get a hold of the local food producers, get closer to your food, fresher, more nutritious, more flavorful, better for your family, but making an impact in the world at the same time.
You know what, Mark, before we let you go, there's a couple questions. One, to go back to the macro, back when Michael and I started the Heartland, a lot of what you're talking about was already in the news. So it's been, 40 years of work. that you've been doing. It's your life's work. But if you take a big look across the country, what are we doing about the loss of small farmers? When small farms close down, how do we keep that land and that farm from going into the factory farming hands?
Well, first of all, 40 years ago, I was doing my homework at the Heartland and then no exit, and
We all were.
enjoying some of that great food. And so thank you for, building that community. We build community around food, as indigenous peoples, in every culture and in every religious vernacular, we used to say grace, and we meant it. Food was our job, collecting it, growing it, preserving it, fighting over hunting rights. And now we take it for granted. So I think the biggest impact we can make, this sounds like a cheap promotion, and it is, we have no minimum donation, but consider joining Organic Eye, because we need to protect the difference between, if we don't know organic when we go to, whether it's Whole Foods or the food co-op or a regular grocery, from one organic from the other. If we want to treat animals more respectfully and the earth more respectfully, we have to have a marketing mechanism, because the biggest thing we can do is shop with intention. And because everybody wants our money, the big guys, the small guys, the bad actors, the ethical farmers. And so we decide when we make investments how our money is then leveraged. And so it used to be everything I had on was made in America. This is a wool Pendleton shirt that's decades old. It's still in beautiful shape. I just had a present of a wool Pendleton robe. It's not made in Maine anymore. It was made in Costa Rica or somewhere like that, and it was inferior. So clothing, we've lost control. It's very, very difficult to buy clothing that was produced by a union member that was paid a livable wage. But farming, we still have a choice. And Kate, you're absolutely right. Farmers for decades have been forced off the land. When I started doing political work on behalf of farmers for the Farmers Union, there were 45,000 independent dairy farms in Wisconsin alone, and averaging about 45 cows. The average is well over 100. And if you took away the Amish neighbors I have, it'd be even higher. We're down to about 8,000 or 9,000 dairy farms. I can't remember the current count. We don't have 45,000 dairy farms, or that's about the number, in the entire United States. So organics was supposed to be the alternative to the rhetoric in Washington. If it wasn't coined by Nixon's USDA Secretary Earl Butz, it was certainly popularized by him. Get big or get out.
Yeah.
And now Secretary Perdue, under the Trump administration, he didn't phrase it the same way, but he basically said, we're throwing you small farmers under the bus. So organics was supposed to be the antidote to get big or get out.
We've talked about milk a few times here, but I just want to bring up, there's been an article in the New York Times talking about is dairy farming humane? Don't need to get into that too much, but I'm curious about the impact on the dairy industry, and whether it's organic or not, of oat milk, rice milk, almond milk, the milks. Can you give us a brief take on the milks?
Well, they used to have an advertisement, got milk. Now I say not milk. And so it is having an impact. I mean, dairy farming, these animals aren't pets. But again, on a smaller farm, there's a relationship between the animals and the humans. It's not unusual that the children are bottle feeding the calves. They bond, they imprint on each other. And then there's a relationship between the animals and the land. So we milk the cows, we put them back out on the pasture, they urinate and defecate, they recycle those nutrients, and then we bring them back. This confinement dairy, whether it's organic or conventional, where we feed them breakfast in bed, and then we burn diesel fuel, taking their manure and spreading it somewhere else, and it's so concentrated it becomes pollution. Again, that's not sustainable. So, but the animals that I know that are owned by my friends who milk cows are really loved and cared for, and they love their people. I like that connection. And the bigger the farm grows, the dairy grows, the less connection there is. So, by and large, for most of the name brand organics, you can buy farm milk and cheese, et cetera, from family scale farmers.
Mark, before we let you go, I want to remind people that you have a new program called Kastel's Kitchen, and that's a blog. Where do they go for that? Mark Kastel, Kastel's Kitchen?
Well, you can go to organici.org and find it, or you can go to the Organic Eye Facebook page. Please like us. You'll help our momentum. Or Organic Eye's YouTube channel. And these are the brands. I basically identify the brands that are available in my kitchen, or how I buy food more economically, all organic kitchen, how I cook some of my food. What are the tricks to not spending your life in the kitchen, but eating whole food rather than processed food?
Okay, so let's talk about, as we finalize this interview, about your love of sailing. And is that an organic pastime? Are you a hotshot sailor? That a woman in an old blue checker cab told me on the corner of Glenwood and Lunk at the Heartland. She said, he's a hotshot sailor. And I was wondering, where do you go sailing if you're living in the driftless region? Are you doing it on the Mississippi River? Tell us about your sailing with an organic perspective.
Well, thanks for reminding me about my dear friend, Terry Glenn, who used to drive a checker marathon for years. I think she's living in Portland now. She's obviously quite old. So yes, I'm a former world champion. I race small sailboats. I'm not a yachtsman. I love the connection between the wind and the water, and doing weather forecasting and the hydro and aerodynamics in trying to get your boat to go fast. So yes, I live in the driftless by definition, missed by the glaciers that came through most of Wisconsin and Minnesota. When they receded and melted to the north, they tore torrents of water, created these deep valleys that the French that we're exploring here called coulees or crevasses, deep crevasses. And so I sail on a dammed up part of the Mississippi River, Lake Onalaska at La Crosse every week in our 14-foot lasers. And then I travel around. I have a little sunfish, and it goes on the top of my car, and my tent goes in the back seat. And boy, I'll tell you, it has saved me emotionally this year with the pandemic, because we're outside, we can camp, we can share food in a distance, and we can be on the water and enjoy competition. And I've raced this past year, most summers between Nebraska and Ohio and Michigan. I don't go too far, but it's a great sport. And if you have an interest, you can contact me on organici.org, and I'll direct you to who you should meet in Chicago to race small boats.
Thanks for being here, Mark. It's great to see you again, to talk to you, and you keep doing good in the world.
Thank you. All three of you, Thom, Katy, and Michael, please come up and visit me in Wisconsin when the coast is clear.
Happily.
Really happy to. Sounds
We're
good.
coming.
Be
Bye-bye.
well, be safe.
Thank you.
बड़े चलो मेरे साथ तुम बड़े चलो मेरे साथ तुम बड़े चलो 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 मिलके हम इस रोग को दूर भगाए ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है जिसको हम जीत न पाए चलो चलो मिलके हम इस रोग को दूर भगाए ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है जिसको हम जीत न पाए तो बड़े चलो मेरे साथ तुम बड़े चलो मेरे मेरे साथ तुम बड़े चलो
We're really glad to have brought you that conversation with Mark because we're trying to look forward, not just back at the chaos of the week. We wanted to update last week's show in our discussion about saving the High Ridge YMCA, the citizens group that's trying to work with saving that building and saving the programs is continuing to meet. It's a virtual online Facebook group. There's a petition that's been launched in order to get a meeting with officials of the High Ridge Y. Many local officials have supported the Park District taking a look at taking over the facility. So we're hoping that the High Ridge Y still has a future. Keep posted.
Also, just another reminder that Christmas tree recycling is going on in the parks until January 18th. Make sure you remove all the tinsel, but when you bring it, if supplies last, you could get a bag of mulch to put on your garden, just like Mark told us how to do for the winter. Normally, we have an in memoriam piece at the end of our at this point in our show, and I think what we've decided has died this week: the Trump administration.
And now we turn to the back page of this paper for the sports report. And many of you know that the National Basketball Association women have taken strong stands around social justice issues and Black Lives Matters. And the Atlanta Dream is a team that is owned by the Illinois corporate farm girl, short-term senator from Georgia, Kelly Loeffler, who lost yesterday. And they have taken a stand against her, and they are looking for a new owner. They're hoping that LeBron James steps in. But they have been really strong supporters of both Warnock and Ossoff, and they're standing up to their owner. Let's hope for the best. Now, we want to thank all the people who make the show possible, including the three of us, Michael James, Katy, Hogan, and Thom Clark. There would be Luis Mejia, our intern, and Lynn Ormer, our music producer, as well as Susan Clark, who helps out. And Thom, we've got some music coming up.
Well, we thought it was appropriate this week to thank Stacey Abrams and her team of organizers in Georgia for pulling off a great support. We're going to go out with Georgia Red Clay, The Women Gather, some drumming and chanting by Sweet Honey in the Rock. So take it away.
And with that, we want to ask you to do good in the world.
Because the world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.